Hey everyone, my name is Dallin Worth and welcome to this episode of the Charter School Connection podcast. I'm really excited because we have some fellow podcasters that are going to be on this episode. They have their own podcast for what they're doing over at Trinity Basin Schools, and I'm excited to learn a little bit more about that, plug their podcast. But before we dive into who they are and their podcast and what they're doing at their school and what makes their school unique, we'd like to thank our sponsors. Obviously, Charter Connect, that helps charter schools grow their enrollment via data-driven marketing, and Enrollio, our new enrollment software that makes it easy for students to slip into your enrollment process. Well, without further ado, let's go ahead and welcome Conor Rogers and Trey Garbers from Trinity Basin. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course.
Great to be here. We're excited to talk shop and talk charter schools and to talk podcasts. It's like our three of our favorite things.
Yeah, this is interesting being on the other side of it for a change. This is weird.
Yeah, I love podcasts, and I think it's fun to listen to hosts of my favorite podcast be guests on other podcasts, and it is really weird to say like, wow, what's that person doing as the guest? It's fun to kind of flip the switch. So
well, and it's a whole mindset shift for us, because we're so used as the host to be like, let's stay it on track, let's redirect the conversation, but as the guests, we're just firing everything. Yeah. We're like, we're gonna go crazy and take over your episode. So
oh, please do. We would love a Trinity Basin the Bolt takeover, so please do. Well, let's go ahead and just start how we normally do. Let's just kind of do introductions in regards to how you both got involved in education, and more specifically the charter school world. Let's go ahead and start with Trey, just because at random I picked you at random. So Trey, tell us a little bit about your story, and then we'll get to Conor.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is actually my first job in education. I am the director of IT services for Trinity Basin Preparatory. And I landed here about 6 years ago. I've been in IT for about a little over 10 years now, working at pharmacy before that. And, I'm sure that's just what teachers want to hear, as another non-educator making decisions for education. But I think at least what I like to think is that that kind of lends itself, because I come from a customer service background. And even before IT. And I know we don't like to think of our teachers as customers necessarily, but it allows me to approach our technology, from a user endpoint of getting feedback, working with Conor and some of our other academic leaders to make sure that we're making the best technology decisions for our district, and really making sure that this stuff works in the classroom, right? Because if it doesn't work and it doesn't help instruction, then we're not doing the right thing, and I'm not doing my job. So yeah, that's my kind of angle at TBP.
That's awesome. Very cool. How about you, Conor?
Trey and I, like the yin and the yang very much. So I was always in education, even since I was a teenager. I was on the beach teaching little kids how to sail boats, and I loved working with kids. So I was like, this is it. I want to be a teacher. Did Catholic schools for a while, and then got into the charter school game. And it's really interesting because there's such a, you ask 10 different people, what do you think of when you think of charter school? You're going to get 10 different answers, because there's all these misconceptions. And especially I remember, I don't know if anyone saw this movie, it was Waiting for Superman, about this this myth of charter schools, and if you have to win the lottery and you'll get an amazing education, if you don't, the system will crush you. And so there, I was like, charter schools, this is new, but came to our charter school district, Trinity Basin Preparatory, have been there now. This is year 6, and it's a wonderful district to work for. We're located in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas, and just doing great things for our kids, and trying to innovate and trying to be the best. And love working with Mr. Trey. He's great.
That's fantastic. I love that. And so you said that you're trying to innovate, try to provide the best education possible for students, and it's pretty obvious that you're doing so, because just by visiting your website, I can tell oh, wow, they have multimedia, like a podcast for people to listen to. And before we started recording, you said that you're going to start involving your students in the recordings of podcasts. And so you're getting students involved. And so I think that's awesome. Could you tell me a little bit more about what you're doing to innovate over at Trinity Basin, and maybe other charter school administrators that are listening to this podcast can kind of steal a couple of your ideas?
Do you want to take that, Mr. Trey? You want to?
Well, I mean, I can speak to the multimedia club. We've got some broadcast clubs and some multimedia. It seems like every year we kind of take this a little further. And with our CTE classes, we have our instructional technology coordinator, Josh Watkins. Shout out to him. He helps out with a lot of our stuff. Really driving that, at least on my end, the technology innovation. And yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about our podcast maybe later. Maybe that'll come up naturally. But when Conor and I ride off into the sunset and we're finished recording this, we're going to try to hand it over to some of our students, and I can't think of a better way to to pass the torch or the spark of the Bolt podcast off to our little innovators in the classroom. It's going to be really exciting.
That's fantastic.
Let's just talk about it now. So our school is Trinity Basin Preparatory, so TBP. So our podcast is called The Bolt Podcast. So it's TBP. You can find us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll link in the show notes.
Yeah, that just now clicked. TBP.
Yeah. So TBP, and like everyone, like when we rolled out, they're like, "Oh, that's great." And then it kind of started with like, Trey and I will do a couple episodes. We'll do one on classroom management. We'll do one on this, like, and then just morphed into this thing. And then COVID happened, so they're like, "There's a whole bunch of episodes right there." And we had students on a couple times. Like we had one because it was released on May 4th, which is May the 4th be with you. So we did a Star Wars episode where we interviewed students about Star Wars because it's like, oh, they grew up with like the different Star Wars than us, and like like the prequels, and was like, so that was interesting to talk to them. And then really it was like, all right, Trey and I have recorded, we're going to record 50 episodes and then just hand it over to the kids and let them take it and run with it. So couldn't be happier about that. As far as the other innovative stuff I think we're doing as a district, like Trey already mentioned, we're doing a lot with instructional technology, with Prometheans. And I also think too, like, we're doing a lot of data-driven decision. You mentioned you have some like software that you plugged that does data-driven. Like we're trying to do that ourselves. Looking at student assessment data, can you filter that data by subpopulations of English language learners, of special ed students, and what are their needs? Even today, Trey and I were working on like, can you do some analytics on devices and which staff members have multiple devices checked out to them? So like, I think the data-driven decision-making is going to be really innovative and really productive for us.
Or maybe which students have broken or lost their Chromebooks, which, student devices, the bane of my existence, but they're not going anywhere anytime soon. So Conor's helping me, get some data-driven information to tighten that up a little bit.
That's fantastic. I think that's so cool. I want to learn a little bit more about Trinity Basin. It's from what I could gather, it appeared that you started back in 1998. Am I correct?
Yeah.
And so that was 2 charters or 2 campuses that you were able to begin with, and then it's kind of blossomed into way more. And so I want to kind of, if you could tell me like the origin story and then how you were able to go from that to where you are now, because it's not easy to grow a charter school by any means. It's so difficult. And I'm sure there's people listening to this episode wondering, how are they able to go from 2 to, and let's see, maybe you can just tell me.
We're at 8 campuses now, going to be 9 in August.
I see that there's some coming soon ones on your website. And so that fascinates me. Could you maybe just give us a little insight into how you started and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, I've got some notes on that. And Trey, you feel free to chime in. So yeah, we started in 98 and we were originally 2 different schools. So it was TBP and it was also School of Liberal Arts and Sciences, which had the unfortunate acronym of SLAS. And then they merged into one charter school. And what was neat, and we didn't find this out until we were like 30 episodes recording, we said, let's find 2 people who've worked in the district the longest and hear some old stories. And they said that one of the school mascots was the Tigers and the other one was the Spartans. So when we combined, our superintendent, Mr. Schaefer, made them into the Titans because it's like Tigers and Spartans together. And now we're the Titans. And I was like, that's really cool of how we got our mascot. But yeah, the need for charters like has just kept growing. And I think like with our growth, especially I think like more so the Fort Worth campuses, like there is definitely a need for an alternative to the traditional independent school district. So we have teams that do extensive research and how is this building going to be funded, and like, is there a need for this charter school in this area? So the state of Texas, and again, I don't know too much about this process because I'm not super involved in it, but they do a lot of due diligence. Even when we wanted to open this new campus next year, they were like, well, how do your scores compare to all the other scores in the surrounding area? What are you going to do differently that these schools in the area are already like? How are you going to be better? So yeah, it's tough to grow, but I think like we've got a good, strong parent base that knows, like when they see that TBP, the T with the lightning bolt, they know like that's a good charter school. We're sending our kids there.
That's fantastic. Could you tell me a little bit about what your school has done to be able to connect with parents and be able to grow that brand recognition? Because I speak with so many schools on a daily basis where they're like, we've been around for 20 years and nobody knows we're here. Like, we're only known by word of mouth, but you could ask anyone in the community and they have no idea that this building on this corner is a charter school and that's us. So how were you able to build that brand recognition?
I mean,
Yeah, we have a whole, go ahead, Trey.
No, I was just going to say we have a really great development team. I mean, even outside of marketing and branding and things like that, of just getting us involved in our community events, hosting community events. We have a campus that has a very large athletic complex that we took over a few years ago that we were able to host, large events out of there, and our parking lots will, have little carnivals and things. We're really working tightly with our community. We have our parent liaison, I believe is her specific title. We do parent universities at some of our campuses. So we'll bring our parents in, sometimes during school hours or after school to make sure that, they're getting familiar with our campuses and our teachers and our practices and helping them become more familiar with what their students are doing and, the
That's
grading
really
and all that
cool.
stuff. You've probably been more involved with the parent communication, Connor, than I in technology have.
I would say number one, yeah, our development team is amazing because they even will make decisions like we're in Texas. Our population of our charter school and students is 85% Hispanic. So they will put like these ads at El Rancho, which is like the Mexican supermarket, and they'll like target the ads like Trinity Basin Preparatory now enrolling like in English and in Spanish, and it's like so they know like these are the parents that can't afford maybe $15,000 a year private school, but they want an alternative to public school. So this is our clientele. So the development team does great. And then the parent universities have been really successful. I'm a parent now. I have a daughter who goes to pre-K in our district. This is the first year. And I just keep getting phone calls like, we're having another parent university, and it's like all kinds of topics. But like some of them is like, here's the social media trends you should be aware of as a parent. Like, here's how to help your kid with math homework. Cause like math has changed, you thought 2 + 2 was 4, but you look at some of the new math now and it's like, oh, we need to educate parents on how they can help their kids with their math homework. So those I would say the two big things. Quick funny story about the parents though is Trey and I were out at a happy hour, and I think Trey had his TBP shirt on, and the manager is like, "Hey, are you guys from that charter school that's got that school over there on Colorado Boulevard in Dallas?" And we're like, "Yes." Like, what is this guy got an axe
Where's
to
this
grind or
going?
whatever? Yeah. And he's like, "Your parents in that car line are like super well behaved. Like, I was really impressed for downtown Dallas that you were able to run a car line through that school." And we're like, "Oh, thank you. Yeah, we do have great parents. Thank you."
No, I think that's awesome. And the fact that people can recognize you for those awesome attributes. So we've kind of gotten some hints for this next question just by what you've said, like the podcast, brand recognition, events, the parent university, the awesome carpool lane. What are some other reasons why parents and students choose Trinity Basin over other private schools, charter schools, and public schools in the area? What makes you guys stand out?
I think it's a combo of like we're in that sweet in between spot of like we're not that super wealthy private school, but we're not that public school either. We're just kind of in that in between because it's like they know like some of them will be like, well, we'll try this school, and if not, we'll go back to our public school. Like they have that option. We don't in terms of our application, we don't really discriminate on really anything other than maybe like if they had an extensive disciplinary history, like, okay, you've been kicked out of 3 schools in 3 years, whatever. But other than that, it's open enrollment. So the only out-of-pocket cost to the parents is the uniform. So that helps a lot. And I think, yeah, they're starting to get to the point where like it's interesting you mentioned that charter school where they said they didn't even know in the surrounding area. Like, I think what Trey's saying is right. Like, we do things just for the community. So like they know like, oh yeah, that charter school down the street, like even if I don't have kids, like I should have an opinion about that charter school because someone's going to ask me, hey, what do you think about that school down the street?
Part of my community.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's fantastic. And which kind of leads me to these other questions. I think this is super fascinating. As you've been able to grow, I feel like the schools that are multi-campus schools and that are growing and are building new facilities, one of the hardest things that they have is to stay true to who they are, while also embracing like, yeah, this school is in a new city and it's a new community. And so it's got to be different and unique, but it's also got to stay true to the standards and values of all the other campuses. So how would you instruct someone or give any tips to someone that is growing and they're seeing good success, but they're not sure how to stay true to themselves while also staying true to these new communities that they're expanding into?
Do you want to?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll say it's interesting. So when we ask our teachers and really all of our staff, what's so special about TBP? The word family comes up a lot. We are a TBP family at a campus level, but also at a district level. And the culture or the type of things that are going on at one campus are going to be different than they are at another campus, but you still have that sense of togetherness. We have our district right now. We're lucky enough to be small enough and close enough ish to have these large district events that we can get everybody to, and that's where you really
That's awesome.
And then of course the remote learning of a few years ago gave us the tools to be able to do stuff remote where we don't have to travel as much. But I mean, we all know that doesn't make up for the FaceTime of being in person. So those events, our training center, which is in our central administration office, kind of in the middle of our district, is where we hold these training sessions and meetings to get those people, pull them out of the campus for a day to meet the other kindergarten teachers in the district and put their heads together. So they're not just siloed to their campus, which is really important.
Yeah, they love that when we get so we have it's called unit unpacking. So for instance, let's say it's like, okay, 5th grade, their literature, they're doing a unit on, I don't know, Don Quixote, right? We get all the 5th grade reading teachers up at the central office, which is equally with the exception of one campus, it's geographically at the midpoint. So everyone's equally inconvenienced by the drive. No one's like, oh, the Fort Worth people had to drive to Dallas, and the Dallas people, it's like, no, you all had to drive in the middle. So, they have that unity already going into it. But then they all get to collaborate on hey, there's this unit coming up. We're teaching on Don Quixote with our shout out to our curriculum coordinators, Kamisha Hawkins and April Frederick. So they'll do and lead them through here's this unit on Don Quixote. Here's the key themes we want to hit. Here's the sources. Here's and they do the same thing with math too. So they're here's the key concepts about tens and ones and place values and all that. And just having those teacher collaboration really helps build the family. And it really once you figure out kind of what's in your charter school secret sauce, for lack of a better term, so hey, these unit unpackings, this is part of our district culture now. Adding another campus is just one more calendar invite to the unit unpacking. So it's yeah, you can still innovate and that new campus is going to have its own flavor, but it's still going to be included in the district. So
those are fantastic answers. Thanks for that. And as you've kind of said, what makes you so awesome, what makes Trinity Basin unique and different, you said, oh, our parent liaisons and our development team, and shout out to so-and-so. And one, I'm inspired that there's so many people that share your vision and that are able to work together. My question is, not all charter schools, unfortunately, have these big, robust teams, and maybe they have team members that aren't very well trained. And they're saying, man, I don't have a development team or a parent liaison or people that are skilled to be able to do a podcast. What tips would you give to that school that maybe they don't have a team, they don't have resources, but they know that they need to do something to be able to be a part of the community? Do you have any tips for someone that is kind of a one-man band, juggling a lot of things at the same time? Any tips for that person other than build a team?
Yeah. I'll talk to that unless you want to go first, Trey. So I would say because we started pretty small. I mean, Trey's been here longer than I am, but yeah, we weren't always this huge, and even our central office was like this. We rented like one floor of an office building in Dallas at one point. So like we weren't always this big, but number one, I would say like you got to have a really solid chief financial officer.
Cool.
Because he manages our money, like Mr. Dworkin, this Trey's boss, so well that allows us to have a development team that can spend money. And our superintendent, when we interviewed him on our podcast, he said like TEA, which is the state Texas agency, he's like they will close us for financial insolvency or for academic irresponsibility. Like it doesn't matter if we fail for grades, if we fail for money, like we still fail. So number one, you got to have like your finances in place, because there are charter schools that do go belly up because they do have passionate educators, but like there's also the running a business side that you need people who know how to run a business. And so that's number one. And then number two, I would say is like, look at your team right now and what strengths, what assets do you have? Like, do we have a person who's really good at X, even though they're in role Y? How could we leverage those strengths, you know? And then two, kind of looking at like, yes, you want to do everything, right? You want to development, you want to do, open new schools, but like, what is the highest priority need right now? So if the highest priority need right now is we don't really have a good phonics curriculum in pre-K through second grade, that's where we're going to focus. Eventually, yeah, we can do these other things, but like, if everyone's on the same page that like, this is our big sprint for this year, is like really shaping down the phonics curriculum, then that's where we're going to put our resources.
It's huge.
So I would say, yeah, looking at number one, money. Number two, who do you have on your team that who has like some strengths that you could leverage? And number three, what are your biggest pressing needs, and what's on the 5-year plan?
Cool. I love that. I don't know if this is true. I feel like any quote can be attributed to Warren Buffett, and I'm not even sure if he said it or not, but I think he once said like, if you have more than like 3 priorities, you don't have any. And so like if you're like trying to do a bunch of things all at the same time, you're not going to get any of them done. So really focus on that. And I love the CFO answer, because oftentimes I feel like we as people look for like the silver bullet, like, oh, this is going to solve all of our problems, and it's going to be this really awesome romantic sounding answer that's going to really, but no, it's simple. CFO, just have someone that knows how to use money. And it's not a very cool answer, but I think it's huge. If you can have someone that can dedicate funds to grow teams, that is, I love that you brought that up. Thank you for those. Anything else that you'd like to add, Trey?
Well, first of all, I'm glad that Conor said that because that is my boss. So if I say it, it's just going to sound like I'm sucking up to him. So thank you, Conor. But he's right, and I'll just attribute that to, let me do some sucking up actually, to all of our leaders. I've told this story before on our podcast, at least, that when COVID hit, and everybody got that extra week off, what turned into months off of spring break. We didn't. We came back into our central admin office and started putting our heads together, and our leaders were the ones who said, we have to get ahead of this before we even know what it is. We need to start figuring out an online LMS and figuring out how we go one-to-one overnight. And I think that's key to our district. We've all, leadership is important. We can put that in quotes, but we've all worked for people who get put in a position and they may be the boss, but they're not really leaders. I struggle with myself, what makes a great leader all the time, but to know that we have the right people in the right places, our CFO, our CAO, our CEO and superintendent, to make those decisions when it's hard to make those decisions. It really makes my job and Conor's job easier to know that they're pointing us in the right direction for sure.
Right. And I'll even jump on that point with the COVID plan. It was funny because we recorded a podcast, like, I think it was like early March or late February of 2020, like right before COVID hit. And like Trey's big announcement at the time was that we were going to go one-to-one like a year from then. And so when then COVID hit, it was like, okay, we're just taking that same plan and just bumping up the time
fast tracking it. Yeah.
So
that is really cool. Awesome. And is it okay if we just go ahead and I want to plug your podcast? We've mentioned it before, and it sounds like you've had a lot of really interesting team members give really insightful things on this podcast. So could you tell my listeners a little bit about what they could expect by listening to the Bold podcast?
Yeah. So it's funny, about 4 or 5 years ago, Connor was, about a year into working here at TBP. I'd been here for a couple of years, and we'd worked on a couple of projects together. But I guess enough for Connor to go, hey, this guy likes talking too. So Connor approached me one day and said, I want to do a TBP podcast. Would you be interested in hosting it with me? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So we started this thing, like I said, about five years ago. Would you say,
I think
Connor?
it was
Something like that?
2019.
Oh, okay,
Spring of 2019 is when we
4 years
launched. Yeah.
ago. Back when we were at that office building in downtown Dallas, or South Oak Cliff, and yeah, we've been able to. Our target audience was just our teachers and staff. It's a very small target, but we've been lucky to have not only internal team members on to talk about just what we're talking about today, right? The charter spectrum, the school district education as a whole. So it's not just specified to our district all the time, but we've also been really lucky to have some really cool guests. If I can name drop for a bit, we had Carrie Conover. We had, I just know her as Pocket Full of Primary.
Yeah, Michelle Emerson. Yeah,
Michelle Emerson. Yeah, there you go. So Connor, I don't know, works his magic.
And Stephen Barkley from Steve Barkley Ponders That Loud, which is one of my favorite education podcasts. So I was like, this guy does podcasts. Let me just shoot him an email. And he's like, yeah, I'll be on your podcast. And I was like, oh my God, we're famous.
Yeah, and then one of our principals, corners us and go, you didn't tell me you had Steve Barkley on the podcast. What's going on? So yeah, I don't know. Connor's got this magical fishing line that just reels in these cool education guests. And yeah, we just pick their brains but I mean, mostly it's our teachers, right? We want to know what they're dealing with, what they're going through. Come on the podcast, be honest with us, tell us what works, what doesn't, what you love about TBP, why you came to TBP, why you came from an ISD to a charter. So there's some really interesting, stories and strategies from across our district is our
very good. You included the tagline. Very nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, it kind of it started more like topic focused. So we did like a couple on classroom management, there's a couple on instructional technology, and then we revisit those topics from time to time. But then like some of the feedback we were getting is like, we kind of want some goofiness on there too. Like we want just when it's usually just being silly. And so we did every Christmas or every December, we do like a holiday episode where we talk about like Christmas movies and Home Alone, and really it's just all Home Alone. It's like there's like 4 different episodes on Home Alone that release every December. So yeah, that's what they can expect. If you want serious topics on classroom management, you can hear some interviews with that. And if you want some talk about holiday movies, you can find those ones. They even shout out to our producer and editor and graphic designer and all the other things, Manola Munoz. So if you look in our podcast feed, like all the episodes have the same like artwork with the lightning bolt, which one he designed. It's really cool artwork. But Beautiful. Then on the December episodes, it has a little like Santa hat and a little like Christmas ornament. So it's like the same artwork, just a little bit jazzed up. So
that's cool.
He does great work.
We're just nerds with microphones. That's really all we are. It's just nerds with microphones.
Oh, nerds with microphones are dangerous in regards to making change. So I love it.
That's true.
Well, that's fantastic. It seems like you both you have a lot of experience in multimedia and bringing opportunities to the table. You're very humble and you're very giving in regards to credit to your team members. It sounds like everyone says the word family, and then I go, okay, like whatever, like they don't really mean it, but it sounds like you guys kind of walk the walk.
We do, and that's why I got not into it, but Trey was on this email. We used to have a person who worked in HR, and she's like, I want to do a video about how TBP's family. And I was like, I hate that because everyone says they're family. And then so it's like the movie The Incredibles. If everyone's special, then nobody is, right? Like, so if every school district says they're a family, then it's like us saying our family doesn't stand out, because I'm like, we actually are a family. Like we don't need to say it. Like they just need to come work for us, and then they'll know that we're a family.
Well, we sound like a bunch of Vin Diesels, all claiming that we're a family.
I love that. Because I feel like with some districts or schools, it's like there's only so many people that are above me, and the only way for me to move up is for them to get out or move down, or like, I don't sense that at all. I feel like it's just very like, we love this person, great leader over here. Like everyone's just content and happy for each other, which is really cool to just feel that vibe from the both of you.
Well, and if I can speak to that just for a second, on one of our very first episode, Conor, and don't let me misquote you, please jump in. Conor spoke to the fact that TBP is fertile ground for new ideas. So that's huge. Like for Conor and I to go to our leaders and say, hey, we want to do a podcast, or all these fun little things that we do, or I don't know, like it's easy to say no, and it's also easy to try something out and it fail and blow up in your face, and you go, well, okay, now we know for next time. But it's really nice to be able to work with other teams, and your leaders see something and you go, hey Conor, you're a really data minded guy. We'd like to put you in this position where your focus is data, and let your nerd brain light up with it. To have that recognition of like, you could do more than what you're doing. Do more, expect more, be more.
There's
right?
there's a mission statement right there.
I promise I'm not trying to do this, but it's just happening. But it's really nice to have that environment where you're encouraged to kind of just try new things, and then pointed in the right direction when they work, and pointed backwards when they don't, and said try again.
Well, and then the learning from the mistakes, like that crashed and burned, and here's why it crashed and burned, and here's why we're never doing that again. And I think that's what it is people aren't afraid to innovate and try new things. Like if there was a science teacher who said, you know what, I'm going to change up the way I do science, but like it's going to be good for the kids. It's like, okay, it better be good for the kids. And if it works, we're going to have you train all the other science teachers in the district, and if it doesn't, like, let's have a plan B, it's that kind of culture that I really love.
Yeah. I'm getting the sense, if I understand correctly, that your staff, students, and teachers, everyone's not afraid to fail, and they're not paralyzed by like being scared, like, oh, if I do this wrong and it turns out that it doesn't work, people are going to be mad at me. I'm going to let people down. I might, you guys have removed the threat of, capital punishment for trying.
Oh yeah. And I think that's the hardest part too, is when we get new hires who came from a district that was that way, and they're trying to bring their, like, I'm afraid of this, and I don't want to. I'm like, no, it's okay. Like you can let your guard down here. Like you're safe. It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. I love that. This is kind of a weird question, and if you don't have an answer to it, that's okay, and we can completely edit this out if it's kind of if it's a question that's too specific. But do you happen to have any examples of like, we did this, it didn't work, and we learned from it? Or if we could go back in time, we would have done this differently, so that if charter school administrators listening to this, they can go, oh, that's a great idea. Now I know to implement this or not do that. Any ideas or experiences that you want to share?
I've got one, and it's more of a broad than a specific example, but unless you want to go straight.
Please go ahead.
So in general, like I would say our Achilles heel so if our strength is we're like super innovative and super collaborative, our Achilles heel is that we become too person dependent and not system dependent. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say you get like one person who knows how to do X, and they do X like amazing. We just let them take it and run with it. And then that person leaves, and then we're like, oh, we have no idea how that person did that thing that was awesome, and we can never replicate it again. So I think what we want to do differently is, like, if there is something that's working, how can we systematize that, so that if that person leaves, that the good thing that they did still stays in place. I know that's kind of broad, but like, I'll give you an example. Like if you had a principal who did like amazing things with PLCs, right? If that principal leaves and the PLCs are gone, like that didn't become a part of your culture. So like, what systems can we make as part of, like, this is TBP's district PLC, and this principal, may do it, above the district average, and we may do better. But even if they leave, the good of a district PLC still carries on.
That's fantastic. The book Atomic Habits by James Clear, he mentions you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And so
it's very true.
I think that's fantastic. I really like that insight. Anything else that you'd like to add to that, Trey?
I'm blanking right now, and which is shocking, because I know I've made some mistakes and definitely learned from them. Maybe my subconscious just doesn't want to admit them on a recording. But no, and I'm blanking right now, but that's part of the culture here. And even I can speak to my IT department, is I would rather, like, here's something I tell our teachers, like, if you feel that you are capable of troubleshooting stuff, or you want to kind of poke and play with some of our technology, please feel free. There's very little that you guys can break that we can't fix. And I tell my technicians that same way, like, open it up, see if we can tinker and figure it out, or chase that rabbit down this path of this weird student device that isn't logged in or checked in properly. There's rarely something that can be broken that we can't fix, and we try to operate that under that mindset.
Awesome, very cool. Do either of you have any books, podcasts other than the Bolt podcast? YouTube videos, movies, anything that you would recommend for our listeners where you have felt inspired or elevated from, where we could share it in the show notes with our listeners?
Go
Please.
ahead.
All of my podcasts are just like comedy, silliness.
Mine too.
But I will say my former boss turned me on to a great speaker named Simon Sinek that I'm kind of digging more into, just on leader. On leadership in general. And so I've been kind of listening to some of his stuff, revisiting those TED Talk videos, just to kind of
Cool.
become a better leader, I guess.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah. Was there more, Trey? I've got a couple.
No, that's it.
Okay. So for the teacher level, I would say definitely Teach Like a Champion 3.0, Doug Lemov. It's great stuff. Any teacher can pick up that book and take a technique out and turn it around in a week in their classroom. Like, it is really good stuff.
Cool.
And then the book for like instructional coaches, principals, instructional leaders, I would recommend is the book Get Better Faster. I think it's by Bambrick and Toyo. And that one is really helpful for especially like an instructional leadership team to look at, like, when we calibrate and go into classrooms, we should all be looking for the same things. Like, we shouldn't three of us walk into a classroom and then all come out and say three different things of feedback that are high priority. Like you said, 3 priorities equals none, right? So that's really helpful if you're wanting to more like coach teachers. And then the leadership book, my boss, Leslie Austin, our chief academic officer, had us read was John C. Maxwell's Developing the Leader Within You.
Mm-hmm.
Really good stuff on leadership there. And then I haven't read it, but I've heard very good things. The principals, I think, all read Leverage Leadership, which I think is another Bambrick and Toyo, if I can find it. But yeah, those would be the books to check out. Yeah, Leverage Leadership 2.0 by Paul Bambrick and Toyo.
Cool. I just was taking notes, and we'll include all these in the show notes. Fantastic. And some of your guests that have been on the Bolt podcast, we'll definitely link to those episodes as well. Very cool. Anything else that either of you would like to say? Maybe something that I didn't ask, but an insight that you have before we wrap up?
I've got one, unless you're still thinking, Trey.
No.
So one of the questions you sent us ahead of time, which I think is a really good question, is if you had a personal billboard, what would it say? And so obviously, like, there's some religious ones that I can't say in my charter school capacity, but I would say the other thing I would have on a billboard is, if you want something to happen, put it on the calendar. And Trey has heard me say this all the time, because it'll be like, oh yeah, we need to get together, we need to have dinner, we need to whatever. I'm like, if you don't put that on the calendar, it's never going to happen. Same thing with charter schools. If you're like, oh, we need to have all the teachers look at the science curriculum, whatever, like, put a date on the calendar, put a time and a place. Otherwise, it just lives in this shoulda, woulda, coulda land. So that's my personal billboard, and I stand by it.
I would definitely invest money in putting that billboard up because I was very wishy-washy with all of my stuff. And then I worked at a marketing agency where my boss, I mean, as simple as it sounds, he just taught me how to use Google Calendar or Outlook or whatever calendar you use. And whenever, like, my phone gives me like my weekly app report of how many apps I've used and how long I use them, like, Google Calendar is like by far like the most used, because I'm just always like, okay, what's next? And I don't miss anything anymore. And I'm like, I went from kind of wishy-washy, flaky to like just being on time. Like Mike Birbiglia, a comedian, like, he has this bit where he talks about that he's on time and that he doesn't understand people that are always late. And he's like, being on time isn't hard. You just have to show up any time before the time, like,
Yeah.
and then you are on time. And so, yeah, I love the whole calendar idea, and I use mine religiously. Like, I have everything on my calendar, and a lot of people like do pushback, like, oh, but I'm kind of more of a free spirit. Like, I kind of like to just be able to go with the flow, and I'm kind of that way myself. But the calendar allows me to be that way, because when I'm
Yes.
stressed and trying to fix things and apologize for missing stuff, or doing things wrong, or my wife's upset at me because that thing that she told me 6 months ago that we were going to do, I completely forgot about. Like, I'm able to be myself because I'm organized, and it gives me the space to be myself. So
Absolutely. And I think some of the science behind that is like, by capturing it on the calendar, it frees it from your short-term memory, which is easily overloaded. So now you don't have to remember, like, what am I doing? Like, oh, can we hang out next Thursday? Oh no, I'm recording a podcast. Like, so you already have that, like, so it frees up
yeah,
your memory to do that stuff and be more that free spirit. So there's
love
science
that.
behind it.
I guarantee if I searched in my text messages, get something on the calendar, just that phrase, top 5 searches are Conor Rogers, no doubt. So can we get something on the calendar? Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Sure.
Well, very cool. Anything else before we wrap up, my friends?
No, I mean, just thank you. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for
Yeah.
having us. This is, like I said, it's a treat to be on the other side. It's nice to not have to come up with the questions, but a little more pressure to answer them. But it's exciting. Thanks for having us.
No,
Yeah.
of
Thank you.
course.
Thank you again. This was a blast.
No, I really appreciate all of your insights and your generosity with your time. Everyone listening, especially if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and you know anyone that is looking for an awesome school to be able to succeed and enjoy their time at, go check out Trinity Basin Preparatory, and listen to the Bolt podcast. I'm going to include a link in the show notes so that you can gain more insights from everything that they're doing over there. I'm blown away by your organization, the success that you're having. It just speaks volumes of your team, what your students are learning. So thanks so much for being on the show.